Welcome to Real Wisdom, where we uncover the real stories of amazing women. Today, I can't wait to introduce Liz Pryor, a woman who's worn so many hats. She's an author, a speaker, a relationship expert, and a life advice guru. From her early days as a teenager in the Chicago suburbs to her transformative years as a life advice expert on Good Morning America, Liz has faced so many challenges with grace, with humor, and with passion. Her books, including her deeply personal memoir, Look at You Now, and the really insightful What Did I Do Wrong, have touched the lives of thousands of readers. But what I love most about Liz is her willingness to be vulnerable, to share her story with raw honesty, and to use her experiences to lift up and empower others. So if you're ready to be inspired, to laugh, to cry, and to learn from a woman who's truly lived a life worth sharing, you're in the right place. And hey, if you want to hear more incredible stories like Liz's, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Hello, Liz. I
Hello, Holly.
am so excited to have you here today because I just think you have such an incredible story. And the funny thing is, when I first heard about you, it was because of your book on friendship or breaking up with a friend. Then you're like, hey, I've got another book. And I read that in probably 6 hours. So I'm like, we've got to talk. When did you realize that your story could actually help other people?
Well, I think for your listeners, I had an experience in high school that genuinely shifted probably everything about who I am. And it was at a very, very young age. It was super challenging. I like to say that I have a PhD in adversity. So basically, it took it took me a while to find the courage to actually come out publicly with my story. And, it's a story that's happened to millions and millions of women in this country. But I got pregnant as a teenager. And it was very taboo in my family and where I grew up. And the quick version is that my parents decided I should be sent away and hidden. They lied and told people I was sick, and I went to a place and had a baby and gave it up for adoption and returned to high school to graduate and went on to college. That's the very generic version of it. Maybe the twist is that I thought I was going to a Catholic home for unwed mothers, but I ended up in a government run facility for wayward, pregnant, foster street pregnant girls. So I was a fish out of water growing up in, Winnetka, top 1% of the country. And I immersed and lived with these girls. And that's really what my memoir is my experience meeting these girls and going through that time in my life. Interestingly, I was sworn to secrecy on this story. My parents, and particularly my mother, was completely convinced that if anybody found out I'd had a child so young, that any opportunity for success or a good life would be taken away from me. And I believed her. So I went home, I lied to everybody, even though half of them didn't believe it. It's this horrible shame, I'm a horrible person. How horrible can you be? Your Catholic parents tell you you need to lie to be able to get through life. It's pretty bad, Holly.
Yes.
So I carry on. I go to college. Emotionally, it was probably, in retrospect, I really, really had to learn who I was on the inside. I had to get through and believe in myself on my own. I had no one to talk to about it. My mom's idea of it was just forget that ever happened, but I actually gave birth to a live human being. And it's just not something that you forget. So carry on, carry on. I meet the man I marry. He's the first person that I just felt like I couldn't begin my marriage with a lie. And I told him, and it was very uneventful. It was very undramatic. He grew up very differently from me and kind of laughed about it. said, "Is that a rich people thing? Because, it's not that big of a deal." Told him, and then I had some more sort of emotional reckoning when I got pregnant with my first child. I have 3 kids, well, 4, including the other one, but
Mhm.
it was just all of this reminder of the shame, feeling nauseous, just being pregnant and feeling like, "Oh, I'm allowed to be pregnant. I'm married. I blah, blah, blah." Then I had 2 more kids, and I do think that part of my parenting, my commitment to the parenting, my devotion to the parenting, may be compounded by the fact that I gave a baby away when I was younger. Um, it was when I got divorced from my husband after 15 years that I started a real I don't think I ever thought, "Oh, wow, if I tell this story, it will help people." It was really more selfish. It was my children were becoming close to the age of love and sex. And suddenly I was faced with, "Oh my God, even if I have to lie by omission to my children, that just feels wrong." So I individually told my children at ages 14, 16, and 17, or 15, 16, 17, the story of what happened. And then I presented, I think I might want to write it. And I don't want to embarrass anybody. And they were just, growing up here in Southern California, they're just very accepting to where I grew up. So the first impetus was, I think, my kids. I wanted to put out the message that whatever happens to you, there is a way to stand behind it and find your way through it and own it. I didn't want a message to my children that when things happen to you in life, whatever these things are, I just felt deeply that if I could truthfully own it and put it out there, I didn't realize how many people it would impact until really the book came out. And when I wrote the first chapter of the book, I had already written a book. It's very difficult to get a book published. So I'd already written one. And I called this publicity lady who I just adore and just said, if I were going to write a memoir, what kind of an agent? And she said, I have a beautiful lady, what's it about? I was like, oh, and remember, Holly, I hadn't spoken about this for almost 40 years. So when I sent one chapter, which doesn't really reveal that I was pregnant and had a baby, it literally reveals this, terrible car ride and my parents and my background, but you don't really know like where I'm going. So the agent reads the thing and calls me and says, this is very intriguing. I love your writing style. So what happens? I mean, like, what's going to happen? And I said, well, I don't know if I can tell you that. When I look back on that, she always laughs. That's hilarious. So it took a while for me to be able to get the words out of my mouth to any living beings. And the next thing you know, I write the whole book, it gets published by Random House, and now I'm being interviewed by you know, huge people on NPR, questioning about my mom and my dad and having big feelings and big judgments. That was difficult. And then it was the book tour where all these women who had read the story came and then shared their stories. And it wasn't just pregnancy stories. These are anybody who's lived with a secret, anybody who's lived with a burden of shame. It's empowering to imagine that you can just say what it is that has happened in your life, stand behind it, own it, don't excuse it. And truth and authenticity are, I think, some of the most powerful tools that we have. People, everybody reads bullshit. When people are not telling the truth, we know it. And we might not say, oh, she's not telling the truth. But when people are telling the truth, you really do respond authentically to, inside truth that comes out. So I had no idea. I mean, before I wrote this memoir, I was hired on Good Morning America after a huge application process of 15,000 people. They were looking for a modern day Dear Abby, a lay woman who'd been through life and could advise people and don't give me a break. I've never even like won at tic-tac-toe. The fact that I got that job was ridiculous. 15,000 people. I had written a book. I had been on camera. So there were a few things in my favor. But Good Morning America kind of knighting me as someone that somebody should listen to really pivoted my career. And the memoir came after that. So on Good Morning America, I felt like, it's nice to be able to help navigate people inside of their lives, their neighbors. I'm very relationship based, so it's moms and parenting and neighbors and friends. Obviously, girlfriends is a big one for me, and of course, divorce and custody. Name it, name crap. I've been through it, but I. It wasn't until the memoir came out and I was doing, readings at bookstores that it really, really hit me how impacting my authentic story could be to anybody who had gone through anything. And of course, I don't know, everybody has some sort of, I really didn't have a vision for a mission to help people, but I genuinely have been like this my whole life. I am the girl, even when I was young, that had this practical, grounded view of things. And then life happened, and I went through a whole lot of different, divorce is very difficult. Winning full custody of my 3 children at age 45, never having worked, in 15 years and having to figure out what am I going to do now. I feel a lot of women, it resonates for a lot of women to hear that I really didn't write my first book till I was 45 years old. And I needed to figure out a way to live and support my children. So that second act thing can be very, very inspiring to women who are not just like with divorce and children and stuff, but wanting to reinvent
Mhm.
or pivot their lives into a place where they feel happier and more stimulated. I've been talking for so long. Holly, say something.
Oh, no, it's okay. But, well, there's a couple of things. Because, first of all, growing up in a Catholic household, especially back in the 60s, nobody talked about love and sex, even though, religion should be based on love. But my parents certainly weren't going to talk about sex. So I can completely relate to so many aspects of your story because it's just such a weird time. And I hope that we're doing better by our children right now so that, especially young girls, not to hold secrets inside because it's such a crappy feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's shaming. I did a TED Talk. They asked me, I really didn't want it to. That's a very scary experience. But I said, what do you want me to talk about in the TED Talk? You want me to tell like a mini version of the book? And they said, Liz, it would be super cool for you to create a talk that it explains to us how you got from living in a government run facility to being the guru on Good Morning America. Like, where's the bridge and what was the emotional pivot or catharsis? And I thought that's interesting and kind of challenging. And I ended up naming the talk Alone on the Inside. Really, it was a talk about judgment. And, what you're saying is that to live with the judgment of others is just, and the shame, right? You have a secret. You're not going to tell people because then they're going to judge you and think you're a certain type of person. The TED Talk sort of goes over what we need to do on the inside to get rid of the negative narrative, to figure out how to have a cheerleader, regardless of what you've been through or what everybody around you is saying. So it's really about building inner strength and having a core inside of you that knows how to advocate for you. And maybe anybody who's gone through anything difficult, and I don't judge the measure of difficulty. I was a wildly overprivileged white girl who got pregnant, boo-hoo, and sent away for 6 months in comparison to the girls I was living with who had no families, nothing to fall back on. That's the perspective that was brought to me. But as a person who helps people, I have no judgment on whatever difficulty it is that you are going through, whether it feels this big or this big. If it impacts your soul and has you narrating bad things inside of your head, that's kind of the stuff I'm good at helping people navigate through.
I'm glad you brought up the TED Talk because I have a quote here. Is it okay if I read it to you?
Please.
Okay. So you said, so if there were one thing that I could do to encourage anyone to do in this life, it would be to think about letting go of judgment, particularly the judgment you have on yourself. Because to be able to create and have inside of you, sorry, it makes me a little emotional, a place that you can turn that will hold you up and root for you would be quite a gift. I think this message is so relevant, especially for women in midlife, because I think you go through a lot of stuff, right? And, you might have spent that first 50 years of your life, raising a family and listening to what other people expected your life to look like.
Yeah.
How can women take that and apply that message to the way we judge ourselves? Like, I feel that was just such an important message.
Thank you, Holly. That's very, very sweet of you. You're such a kind person with such a big heart. Um, I hate to imagine it. The way to get there is to go through, horrible adversity. I think that we all have a version of something difficult that has gone on in our lives. What seems to be challenging to explain to people is how critical it is. Not even for the people you love or the people in your life or your children or your parents or your friends. It's kind of the oxygen mask theory, right? We are not good we aren't our best to anybody else if we haven't figured out how to nurture and care for and root for and bring ourselves up. And maybe it is helpful when you're going through a challenge. Like, I really do think that, when you're going through challenge, there are moments where you can go right or you can go left. And you don't know it. It's all subconscious. Maybe deciding to be more intentional and more conscious. You see, in the talk, I don't know if people pick up on this in the TED Talk, but one of the reasons that self-judgment is just so accepted is because it reads, in my opinion, as falsely humble. If you trash yourself, you're being whatever we call self-deprecating. It's not hurting anybody. No, 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 no. It is really, really hurting somebody. It's hurting you. And I don't mean like the joking self-deprecating. I mean inside of your head, when you're getting down on yourself and not rooting for yourself and really picking yourself apart. We need to look at that as detrimental, negative, and something we don't want to do, as much as we wouldn't do that to our daughter or our partner or our mom. Like, you can't do that to yourself because then it becomes this habit. And then you know how unconscious we are of the habits that we have that are bad. So I like to start at the beginning, which is, what do you really think about you? And here's the thing, Holly, there's a fine line. When we meet people that come across arrogant or full of themselves, I'm around enough and I do this enough to know that typically when I meet anybody who seems sort of self-centered and not empathetic and not connecting, I actually know now that those are the people that are in the worst shape because they're compensating and trying to make up for how little they feel about themselves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know if those people are helpable from my point. That's their coping mechanism. That's how they deal with all the shit they don't like about themselves. But the average person, if they were just listening, could say, I don't think I'm all that, but I do think I'm a good person. And if you just try and catch yourself, and I say that in the talk too, just catch yourself. When something goes, when you make a mistake or something happens that doesn't work in your direction, Is the immediate thought in your mind, God, you are such an idiot, to yourself? And if it is, so in other words, the next time you make a mistake, take note. What is the voice? What is the voice that you're hearing in your head? And that is a way to consciously decide, okay, you know what I just did? I just called myself an idiot. And, basically I'm human and I make mistakes. It's tough, especially the older we get and the more sort of patterned we are. I find that, like, in my work, in the difference between men and women in my work, women are more malleable internally. Men seem, and I don't know why. I'm not a therapist, but I don't know if it's, all of us who have the ways in which we go at our lives. Most of that is really ingrained pattern and habit. And when it's good stuff, that's great. When it's negative and impacting your life badly, it's not great. And I do find that men seem to be a little bit more feet in the ground about not changing. I am who I am. This is what I am. I'm a blunt object. I blah, blah, blah. Whereas women, we seem to remain a little bit more open to, yeah, maybe I am that way. Maybe I can tweak that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do see that in men more often. We're like, then I am what I am, and
I am what I am. That's
yeah,
what I do. I well,
right.
I just want to go. Wait, what? Why can't you just not do that?
Right, right. But I think women want to see some type of improvement. You're like, this doesn't feel good. Like I'm
We
feeling a
do.
little
I think
stuck and out of sorts.
we also live lives where, raising kids and doing what we do, we're forced to be a little more malleable, and to go with the punches and go with the flow or decide to change our mind or, I think our lives are just more conducive to keeping our minds open. I feel like if everybody, here's what I say. When somebody says to me, yeah, well, this is just who I am, Liz, this is what I do. This is who I am. This is how I've always been. I always say to that person, if I'm in a consultation session or I'm in a talk, I say, it's interesting because I've never said that in my entire life. And I never, ever want to say that because for me, I am constantly wanting to grow and to learn and to pivot and to change. So for those listening who feel themselves saying and thinking, I know, but this is just what I am. I'm a Scorpio, so this is what I do. I'm an Aries, so this is what I do. No, 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 no. We are completely in charge of what we do and how we think. And beyond the layer of this is who I am and this is, it just wouldn't come to me to ever say, I'm never going to change. Now, think about why you would say, I'm never going to change. Because for some reason, that you need to think about, you have come up with, this is what I do to get through blah, blah, blah. You're not
Yes.
saying that part to the person, but this is how I do it. And if I don't do it like this, I am very vulnerable to all these sorts of things that I'm scared of. Okay. So people who say, I'm not very affectionate, I'm not very verbal about how I feel about things. Every time you say, I'm blah, 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 do yourself a favor, not to the person you're talking to, but ask yourself, why do I say that? Let me go over that again. Why aren't I very affectionate? You might come up with you're worried that someone's not going to be affectionate back and you're going to be rejected and you feel too vulnerable. Whatever it is, I feel like it's our duty to continue to challenge ourselves. Not out loud, not like we're doing right here, but
Right.
when you're in life, to ask yourself, wait, I'm going to think about that for a minute because I do often say, this is who I am, and that's not going to change. That is to me the reddest flag there can be.
Yes. So you're like,
Right?
oh, something's going on here.
And a lot of people say it. I mean, you hear it all the time. This is just the kind of person I am. No, 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 no. Let me tell you something. We're all in charge of the kind of person we are, right?
You were talking about about being on Good Morning America, and giving advice. Was there ever a time when you were doing that? Because what happens to me is sometimes when I'm talking or if somebody's asking me a question like, how should I handle this? Or what should I do? You want to blurt out your own story, but I'm like, "Ooh, nobody wants to hear that." Did that ever happen to you where you're just like, oh, is this going to come shooting out of my mouth one day about my past or who I am? Or was it You
No.
already had shoved that down.
No, I think this is how I know that I was just meant to do what I do is on Good Morning America and all the other things. I've done all the podcasts and I'm always like, give me something that challenges me, Holly. Okay, so your husband sends you the wrong color flowers. I mean, I often use, in terms of like the parenting and relational help, I can use examples, and I do sometimes of my children. But no, it was more, it's more, and I still do it. I still think, come on, give me something that I would really, really have to struggle to help you figure out. But I've been doing this so long. I've heard so much, and from so many, particularly in the space of female friendship. Like, this is some heated that book I wrote a book on how women end friendships with each other. And it was 12 years ago. So I've probably spoken to 10,000 or more women about their relationships with their girlfriends and heard 1,000 billion breakups. And of course I have really gathered common denominators to
Yeah,
why
you
things
see a
happen.
pattern.
Exactly. So I know I'm more on Good Morning America. Well, first it was the Cindy Brady, like, we're live. He's just like, am I just gonna freeze? But then a really good friend of mine just said, just keep looking people square in the eye and doing what you do and be you. And so when I was talking to Robin and George, it was a good note to really look in their eyes because it keeps you in your moment as opposed to, looking left or looking right, seeing all the cameras or the audience. And mostly I think I don't subscribe. I think a lot of women are asking questions that they genuinely want the answer to. And sometimes you just need a third unbiased opinion of something to have you say, "Oh, do you really want to worry about that so much or could you do this?" Nothing on the show. I did a column online for them as well. I also did a column in Family Circle magazine where they said, what you can do is every month you can tackle whatever topic you want and you can write a whole article about it. That was super cool because I could come up with these like universal experiences. Like one of my kids is a competitive athlete and I got so many responses from writing about being the mother of a competitive athlete and how to handle the other kids. And I mean, there's so many sort of universal topics that we can get to. I don't remember a time when I thought to myself, "Oh gosh, now I'm going to reveal something that I'm not going to be happy about revealing." I think I'm pretty wired to keep it locked up there, Holly. After 38 years,
Yes. Yeah, you
you
had a
know,
little bit of practice.
yes,
Do you find it challenging when you're talking to somebody and you know they're not going to follow your advice
yes,
and it's going to go badly?
yes. Now, the people who reach out and hire me, I have found it consistent that they are intentional, they're paying, and they want answers. Those people listen to me. Now, get to the rest of the world. Um, you know, Within my friendships, and sometimes when I'm on a panel, I mean, I have a really good radar for people who are not exceptional listeners. I can talk, and my challenge with almost everything I do is to make sure that I'm talking in a way that that is the most optimal way to get people to listen and hear me. Like, you can listen to my words, but are you hearing what I'm saying? And for all of these years and this experience that I've had in talking to women, also, I am one of five girls. I, in my family, there's seven kids and there's five, I have four sisters. I really know women. And when I'm presented with somebody who even asks a question, but you're saying, is it obvious to you if they're not really going to listen or do what you say? I'm pretty good at reading that at the onset, knowing how to present to that person a little bit differently than I would per se to you. You ask me a question, I know that you're going to listen and you want to hear. And then there are other people who, I think the most common thing for me, particularly with women, is when a woman tells me that she has been dumped by a friend. Within 3.5 minutes, I can see that she is possibly completely unaware of her impact on the people around her. You know, people like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And those people I speak to very differently. But like at the end of, I'm considering writing a follow-up book to the friendship book, because when I wrote the book, it wasn't necessarily prescriptive. It was just, wow, you guys, look how women end friendships with each other. It's so painful. It's so hurtful. You know, it's scientifically proven that because we create and maintain these bonds over a lifetime, we live longer than men. How can we be treating the endings like this? That's really what I did in that book. And I wrote tons of stories, and it wasn't prescriptive. And now that it's been out in the ether, and I've done what I've done, I have so many answers that I didn't have when I wrote it. And I think that women are, this is interesting to me. I sort of coined the initiator and the receiver. So one girl has been friends for 10 years, and she decides she doesn't want to be friends. So she stops calling, stops texting, she ghosts. And the other girl is the receiver. What I have learned in the 12 years since I wrote that book is that although it seems natural, and we're not, nobody ever likes to say this out loud, but when someone says, you know, my friend just stopped, I have no idea what happened. And normally they're crying telling me this. It's like a romantic break. Typically we all think, well, I wonder what she did. I mean, we do. We think,
Yes.
I don't say it, but I think it. And typically it's true. She's done something. However, what I've really learned is the girl, the initiator, the girl who stops the friendship, is truly the one that we can look at and say, okay, here's the deal. And I'll just give an example. Your friend, over the course of the 10-year friendship, did this, 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 this. These are all things that would bug any of us. Okay. And
Right.
so at time number 20, you say, that's it. I'm not even going to tell her why. I just can't be in her life. What I've learned is if the initiator were to have had the courage to address any of the times that her friend had bumped her out, like showed up late or taken over and been selfish and not asked her how she is, if in the moment she were to say, you know, we've been talking for 30 minutes and you haven't even asked about me. If she'd had the courage to say that, then 20 of those times later, we wouldn't be at the ending of the friendship. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. If she
So,
had just spoken up.
yeah. And the reason, you know, we don't like conflict, and we certainly don't want conflict with our female friends. Like, we have enough conflict in our marriages, in our lives, at work. So it's kind of interesting to me that a lot of crying receivers of this behavior, and I say, look, it doesn't mean that they didn't do, you know what I mean? Like the
Right.
communication wasn't enough, because, you know, you need to give the receiver a minute to see, like, maybe if she wants to adjust her behavior. But this is how we roll. And the truth is, I don't know if I could ever get women to address in the moment a grievance that they have with another woman. And the crazy part of that is we need nothing to address our husbands, our partners, our romantic. We are like this.
Yes.
We are boom. Why did you do? What are the doors open? What are you doing? We don't do that with our friends. And we need to think of it more like the friendship is like a romantic partnership. You need to tell your husband, if it bugs the crap out of you that he wears his shoes up the stairs every day, or what, you're going to tell him.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And we have no problem. I think it's interesting that we have no problem when it's romantic, but we have huge problems when it's female friendship.
You know, and they should be very important to us, especially as we get older. Friendships should be valued a little bit more. And I know exactly what you're saying because I've probably been on both ends of that friendship spectrum, and it doesn't feel good either way.
No, it doesn't. It's equal to like breaking up with a man. It doesn't feel
Hmm.
good to do that. It doesn't feel good. It feels particularly bad because with romantic, we have to say something, and we do. We say, I break with thee. However it is, it's not you, it's me, but I can't. We don't do that to women. We don't say anything. So what you're doing is leaving this receiver in the lurch of, wait, is this friendship over? Why hasn't she called me back? Like, and we know when we do that, that is a super bad way to feel about
Yeah.
yourself. It makes you question everything. And I'm kind of here in terms of the female friendship stuff, I suppose. It doesn't help tremendously, even though it's true. Many times that a friend dumps you, it's about the friend. It really
Hmm.
isn't so much about you. It could even be about the friend and that she doesn't have the courage to sit you down and say, because here's the thing, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? Hi, am I going to break up with you? Like, we're not dating. So, the best you can do, I can't even advise people to break up with their friends like they would a partner, but I would advise, I can never advise something I couldn't do. Okay. I
Right,
can't.
right.
So, my big advice on if you're going to end a female friendship and you're just not interested in the back and forth of working it out, to at least write an email that says, hey, I'm sure you're wondering why I haven't called you back or texted you back. I just need you to know that I'm going to take a step back here. I don't
Hmm.
want you to think I ghosted. I don't want to ghost. I literally have to give the advice that I could do. And I could not sit down with a female friend and say, no longer. I had to do this fairly recently. And it was really, really difficult to follow my own advice. Plus, I live under this huge pressure of being the friendship expert.
Right. So people are like,
What's she
she
doing?
should know how to be a better friend, right?
Exactly. But if, listen, I don't think it's a crime, Holly, to not want to be friends with someone anymore. I really don't. I just think that there's a civilized, decent, and respectful way to do it.
Yes,
And
true.
I did write a note and say, this is what I'm doing. I have no idea how long I'm going to want to do it, but this is how I feel. I'm kind of uninterested in going back and forth as to the why. I just hope that
Yeah.
you can respect that this is what I want to do. And it was not received well.
No, I could imagine that.
I need a friendship expert. When do you think this is? Yeah, I do. Actually, I
Hmm.
do think that this is pretty civilized. And, you know, women can get super, super angry when it comes to female friendship and someone ending. And then it's really bad. Then, like, if they live in the same community, they have to see each other. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Well, and I think, why is it though that we do that to ourselves? Because I think it comes back to the whole thing about telling your story, because we you hide those parts from each other, whether it's a friend or family or partner or whatever. But then it begins to consume you. And then I think in terms of a friendship, you withdraw, or you withdraw from community or society, and
Exactly.
you're not yourself anymore. How do we get women to stop doing that and just feel more comfortable sharing their truth, sharing their story, being just
Yeah.
honest instead of always feeling like they've got to hide from something?
Well, I think it is a habit, and patterns are tough to change. I mean, the beginnings of that is to be open yourself to deciding I'm going to be more intentional and more conscious about who I am so that I can feel like, to be honest, at this stage in the game of life, Holly,
Mhm.
I don't care nearly as much about what the people out there think about me. I know that the key to this is what I think about myself, period. And so I've actually done the work to come clean about the secret stuff, which has been
Mhm.
extremely helpful. And then in my work of helping and advising, I learned so much about myself and about other people that way. So, in answer to your question, how can we entice women to really what we're saying is to live more authentically? Because living authentically um, can be completely a foreign idea to people who have been hiding something, right? And in my case, I wrote an entire book about an experience that I had kept secret, but let's dumb it down. You don't have to write a book. maybe if there is something that you've been living with that you feel shame around and that you feel that you've been hiding. First thing I would imagine is just sit down and journal it, even if you're not a writer at all. Write it all down so that you can read it with your eyes and look at it from a different point of view than living inside of you. And then the second thing would be try your hand. And I did this before I wrote my book. I told a few of my very, very, very close personal friends, and you have to feel what that feels like for someone to receive it. And then mostly like, how do you feel telling it? Right.
Yes. Yes.
And because it's new to you. So if you could write it down first, and then you could take one or two truly trusted confidants
Mhm.
and get it out, you could imagine that something inside of you is gonna feel a bit different. And also like to do the sort of the mock, what's gonna happen here? Like whatever we've done or been through. For me, I didn't want to be seen as the girl from high school who left and lied and had a baby. And that was probably compounded by what my mom thought, right?
Sure. Oh, sure. Yes.
And then I would say this. I didn't realize until I wrote the book. And then when the book came out, you can imagine, yeah, I wrote a book about having a baby as a teenager. Think I'm not going to be seen as the lady who I'm I was really surprised and overwhelmingly grateful that I'm not seen as the girl who had the baby in high school. I'm actually seen as the girl who helps people.
Yes.
That was a risky step for me because there it is. There's a book out in all the libraries about me having a baby. And that's something I was trying to stay away from. So my point is this, whatever we go through, it is a part of who we are. It does not define us. What ends up defining us is truly how we choose to get to the other side of whatever that challenge is. So on the other side of me having a baby and being completely ostracized in high school, on the other side is I get to go out there and help others who have secrets. I'm not my fear, right?
Right. Because isn't there so much, there's got to be so much power in sharing. And I'm sure in the beginning you didn't feel that way.
Yeah,
But
it was
then once
scary.
that's out there, it's like, oh, here you go. It's there. And it's not as, hopefully it wasn't as scary for you as you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it wasn't. And also, it's important to remind people that what is so scary to us, okay, what? There's nobody that can help us through what you and I are talking about.
Hmm.
We literally have to, what I call, walk it out. Okay. Everybody knows I had a baby when I was in high school. And what I didn't realize before was that I'm also a whole lot of other things. I did have a baby in high school, but I also got married and have three beautiful children. I also have written two wonderful books. So you need to remind yourself that whatever it is you're talking about, there's many, many more components that define who you are. Right?
Were you surprised about someone who supported you that maybe you didn't think would?
That's a good question. Geez, I've never been asked that. I mean, I hate to report I can't think of one. I had a lot of people that I thought would support that surprised me that didn't.
Hmm.
Mhm. But I have surrounded myself so much subsequently from growing up with people who I know are just much more flexible and open minded. And really, it was the guy I'm with now, who I've been with for 15 years, who I told this story to, who was such an amazing support and understanding. He really, really convinced me that I needed to write this story. And I laughed. And some of you don't know where I come from. This cannot happen. And I'm so glad that I had his support and understanding. And, listen, everybody comes from a different perspective. He grew up in a middle class family, in Denver. And he said, he thought that when my siblings and everybody were to hear like how difficult it was and challenging, but also how defining and how remarkable that everybody would say, "Oh, it's fine." And that is not what happened. And I knew it, you know? But I will tell you this, the most powerful tool that any of us can ever have in life is the strength within who we are, knowing who we are and being able to, that doesn't mean we're perfect. That doesn't mean we've done no wrong. It just means really, really knowing yourself. And if not for this experience that I went through in high school, that then led to so many more experiences for me to have to hide, to have to, if not for all of that, I would genuinely never have become the person with the point of view that I have today. And I don't just say that. I know that that is true. It's a good way to look at whatever it is you think you have in life that has been challenging and be grateful to a degree for it. You know what I mean? Like, do you identify with having to hold something in or having to live with shame?
Well, I think it was definitely a family thing. I was the fourth child in my 9-10 years, so there was a big gap between me and
Oh,
my siblings. And I think I had a different growing up experience definitely than they did. And um that's a whole nother story for another podcast. But yes, I do think I held a lot back because I didn't feel that I would be supported or even in a way protected from
yes.
life. And I was a stronger person because of that, because I felt alone, and I thought, I'm just going to have to do this myself. I'm going to have to get through. I'm going to have to get out of the house. I'm going to have to live my life, and the family is going to be able to have to figure out how they want to live theirs, because I
And let
can't
me
be a
ask you
part of it.
this. With going through something like that, would you say that that has impacted the way that you parented your children?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because I wanted to be more a part of their lives, and I wanted them to be able to come to me and just say, "Hey mom, this is what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. I think it's going to be pretty bad. Let's talk through it." Whereas there was no talking in my house. And I always felt that raising my own children, I didn't want them to ever be afraid that there wasn't something that they couldn't come in the front door and tell me. Not
See,
that I
that's
wasn't going
huge.
to freak out or that I wasn't going to have an opinion, but I wasn't going to ostracize them or dismiss their concerns or just tell them to kind of suck it up, that get on with your life, because we need the support of our parents.
Of
And
course. And you don't even realize it, but you see there you're kind of breaking the cycle. And
yes,
I had to move from Chicago to California, get married here, raise my kids, and I was very conscious of how open I was going to be with my children in terms of like, I mean, we had from when they were tiny, I just didn't want them to feel like they had to lie to me. And I had to say, whatever happens, whatever you do, down to murdering someone, I need to know the truth so that we can help. And I do think that my experience helped me to sort of change the cycle, which it sounds like it did with you.
yes,
That you're not going to have this generational trauma because nobody ever talks about anything ever, generation after generation. You broke
correct.
it, right?
Yes.
Which is so cool.
Um, wasn't easy. That's for sure. But it took a lot, and I think that's why I'm so, even now, so interested in women's stories and what we're doing and how we can support each other, because I think sometimes that's might be all somebody has.
100%. And look, I mean, we are definitely at an age where so many things that mattered to me when I was younger don't matter to me now.
Hmm.
What I really want to focus on personally and professionally is truly just living as honestly and kindly and generously as I can. Because I've lived a good, long life. As much adversity as I've been through, I have had incredible success and privilege and luck. So this is women to women. This is where we get the motivation, the encouragement, the inspiration. And for everybody who wants to do a restart, a reset, a pivot, a second act, it's one of these quiet, you don't have to present it out to the world. What you and I are talking about is the kind of stuff that goes on internally. And this is just who I am. Like all the billions of podcasts and reality shows, everything that is out in the ether right now in our culture externally is the opposite of what I like to do. I like to work from the inside out
Yes.
because I think if you're just working externally, you're going to hit a dead end,
True.
right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you need the engine is on the inside. So that's the stuff I like to work on and tweak and help people with. And once they can really feel comfortable and confident inside of who they are and they have an ally and not an enemy living in there, then you can go on to the external.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work to do. So, it's just, I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation.
Me
And
too.
I hope this isn't the last one because you just have such a wealth of knowledge. And I'm so happy to have met you. And I want more women to know about Liz. What's the best way in which we can engage with you?
Oh, thank you. It's my website, lizpryor.com. My books are just, you can Google it, but the memoir is called Look at You Now by Liz Pryor. And the female friendship book is What Did I Do Wrong? When Women Don't Tell Each Other the Friendship is Over. And basically you can read all my articles and see the TED Talk and everything on lizpryor.com. And Holly, I'm a big fan of yours. I want to support 100%. So I am telling you, whatever you come up with, I will 100% be willing to do this again. So if you want to put something together and we do a series, and I hope that the people who follow you and respect you, enjoy this and we can bring more to them. So until next time.
Until next time, you got it.
Okay. Thanks, honey.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.